Chapter 17. Saturday, late morning. Mac took his leave soon afterward. Doreen watched him drive away, delighted he was collecting supplies for her deck. He was a really nice guy inside and out. He hadn't said anything about the ledgers, aside from taking photos, but that was it. He probably thought it was all junk. To a certain extent, she agreed. But there was still the missing ice pick. She turned around and headed out to her back garden to work on her own weeds. She kept looking around to see where the garden would stop and where the deck would start, and it was almost impossible to not feel the excitement surge through her. The fact they had come this far without a penny, and no, it wasn't very far, she admitted that, but it was something. It was enough, she could see it taking form. She still clung to her hope that maybe, just maybe, it would become a reality. Soon. She wondered what the chances were of having a small barbecue at the end of it all. Maybe not this month, maybe in a few months. Of course, if she didn't know how to cook on a stove, how the heck would she learn to cook on a barbecue? But of course, her mind answered immediately that it would be Mac's job. She laughed. She shoved her spade into the dirt one more time and picked it up, shook off a pile of weeds, and tossed them to the side into her growing weed pile. She would be delighted, just finishing off this initial turnover in the garden as it was. When she walked back into the house to get water a couple hours later, she saw a text from Mac, saying he forgot to leave her money. She laughed. "Yeah, and I could use it," she replied. "I need groceries." "I'm out running around," he said. "I'll stop by again and drop it off real quick." Good enough. She leaned back, finished the glass of water, and then poured herself another one. Of course, she couldn't get her mind off the Darbuncle brothers. She couldn't let the fact that she didn't like the gardener brother Fred sway her into thinking he was the guilty party, not his brother Frank, but it was awfully convenient that both brothers inherited something from their parents. And both were still living in the house. So what was the motive? The house. It didn't really make sense when the brothers had always seemed to live there, with their parents. With Henrietta. Doreen hadn't seen anything to say the parents had been sick. Maybe the parents had just decided they didn't want to become any sicker. Wanted to leave what little they could to their children, not have it all eaten up by medical bills. Doreen would need to go a little deeper into their lives. She sat down at her laptop and searched everything under the parents' names individually, and together. And thereafter searched both brothers. Then she came across Fred's juvie record. Or at least what she presumed was a juvie record. She sent Mac a text asking about how that worked. He called her to answer her text. "I can check when I get back to the office," he said. "But if it's a juvie record, we can't look into it. They were sealed when he turned 18. So once you turn a certain age, you're good to go." She didn't understand that mentality. If he was in trouble as a young teen, yes, the records become sealed, and he gets a fresh start. But if it's major, like he killed somebody, then he would have been tried as an adult, and his records wouldn't get expunged. What if he was even younger than a teenager? Then it's hard to say. It depends on the case. "Interesting," she said. "Why?" "Just getting an idea of who this family is," she said. "I'm interested if the brothers had something to do with their parents' disappearance or not. With Henrietta's subsequent disappearance too. The brothers' inheritance makes them look suspicious, although you don't seem to think their parents had much to pass on." "Someone has to inherit no matter how big or small," Mac pointed out. So, what else could the motivation be to get rid of Mr. and Mrs. Darbuncle, as well as Henrietta? "I don't know. That's the thing about this job. Sometimes you just don't get answers." With that, Doreen could tell Mac's focus was off doing something else, and she was no longer at the top of his mind. He hung up shortly thereafter. And the trouble was, it wasn't easy for her to let go of all this. She decided she'd had enough of hot and sweaty gardening work. She took a quick shower and changed into shorts and a tank top, which reminded her that she still had more clothes to go through, so she went through the last of them. Well, she hoped it was the last of them. She probably needed to go through her own reserve too, but she already had a couple more bags for Wendy. She packed them up and took them downstairs in time to see Mac pull up. He handed her the cash and said, "I'm not staying. I'm heading off to shop for groceries." She nodded. "I might take these bags to Wendy and do some shopping too." He turned to look at her as he walked toward the truck. "What do you want to learn to make next?" She followed along, then frowned, looked up at him, and said, "I don't know. Suggestions?" "It's hard to say," he said. "Summertime is for barbecues, but you don't have one." She nodded morosely. "I was just thinking about that earlier. Maybe once we have a deck, I can afford to put a little barbecue out there, and you could teach me how to use it." "Maybe," he said. "You need some more basic recipes in your life." "I'd love some, but I don't know what you call basic." He replied, "The American dream. Burgers, hot dogs, and pizza." She burst out laughing. "I like pizza well enough, but not enough to learn to make it. That looks fussy." "And it's cheap enough to buy," he said, "any time of year that you want it." "But burgers," she said with a smile. "Are they hard?" Mac shook his head and laughed. "Their ground meat formed into a ball, flattened and grilled. It doesn't get any easier." He studied her and said, "You've never made any, have you?" "Nope," Doreen said. "I'm not really sure when I had one," she said thoughtfully. He stopped. "Seriously?" "Well, I'm pretty sure I've tried one," she said, "but I don't know what fast food place it was." "Nope, burgers should be barbecued," he said. "Anything less than that is sacrilege, but if we don't have a barbecue." He tapped the door of his vehicle, contemplating it. "If you can just fry them in a pan," she said, "would it be an easy enough thing for me to cook?" "Like I said, it doesn't get any easier." "What about hot dogs?" She wrinkled her nose up at that. "I'm not sure what a good hot dog tastes like," she said cautiously, "but the ones I had didn't taste very good." He nodded. "Well, you probably didn't have big Polish ones or brats." "Brats?" she asked in confusion. "Bratwurst in a bun, smothered in sauerkraut." Her eyebrows shot up. "I like sauerkraut." "Do you like pierogies?" She stared at him. "I don't know what they are." He groaned. "Okay, I'm going shopping," he said. "I'll pick up a couple meals worth to show you how to cook them, and we'll do it one day next week if you're okay with that. Maybe a burger lesson too, thrown in there. And then maybe next weekend we'll do pierogies or brats, something along that line." "Sounds delicious," she said. "I'll pick up salad fixings." "Aren't you eating more than salads these days?" "Salad, sandwiches, and omelets," she said solemnly. "Some of the other stuff you showed me is too hard." "You mean the pasta?" "Yes," she said, "but I should try to cook just some plain pasta." "Yes, you should," he said. "You pick up some, and we'll cook it tomorrow night." "Well, I'm cooking burgers." "You could cook your pasta tonight. The pasta can be cold in your fridge tomorrow, and you can warm it up in a pan or the microwave." She beamed. "I like that idea." "Good enough." And then he pulled out of the driveway.